Today we're going to talk about schools and the education system here in Malawi. Schools came to Malawi, of course, with the colonial government, and they brought with them the kind of schools and the kind of education system that they knew from their own experience back in the UK. Most of the colonial administrators in the late 19th century, early 20th century were from well-off families. They'd been to private schools in the UK, most of them quite expensive private schools. That was what they knew, and that was basically the system that they brought here and tried to introduce in a very, very different kind of society. So that was the system that was brought in, and it was stretched to make it fit in the local context as much as possible. The system now has not changed that much. The curriculum is broader and more suitable for Malawi, not so European centred and so on. But apart from that, the school system has not changed greatly. What has changed is that there are now millions of children needing to be educated in a system which was not built for that number and which is not funded for that number. The system currently is quite complicated. There are government primary schools which most children go to. They are often very large, especially in town, and the class sizes can be enormous. It's not unusual to have 100 children in a class with one teacher, especially in the younger age groups before kids start to drop out. When you get to secondary, there are various levels of secondary schools, all a little bit arcane. Some church schools, some government schools, some mixed between the two, at various levels. Some of them are very similar to what older people in the UK would remember as grammar schools. Schools where the kids are selected and where they take the top exam performers from the end of primary and put them all together into a slightly better funded school. So the system is relatively complicated within the government schools. On top of that, there are a lot of private schools. There are some private primary schools. They are for the rich. Most people do not use the private primary schools, but people would if they could afford it. There are not so many of them about. The reason why people would try to go to a private school, even at primary level, if they could afford, is mainly because of the class sizes. In secondary, there are a lot of private schools. Malawi government says that there are enough primary schools for every child to have a place, and if you're willing to put up with the very large class sizes, that is technically true. At secondary level, there are not enough government school places for every child. And that's taking into account the fact that a lot of children have dropped out by the time they get to that age. In Malawi, if you fail your exams at the end of a year, you have to go back and repeat that year. So a lot of parents will put up with that, perhaps for 1 year, but if the child fails again, many parents will decide that this is just not worth it. Their child could be doing something more useful. They could be going out and trying to earn a bit of money rather than wasting another year in school if they're not going to pass and not going to move up. But some people do press on, and people do repeat a number of times, sometimes during primary school. Also, many kids drop out, at least temporarily, because of family issues. The family may be really struggling for some reason, sickness, a parent who dies. All those things can lead to a child dropping out for a term or a year and then having to go back and start that year again. That does mean that there are a lot of very much older students than you might expect in those classes. There are a lot of teenagers in primary school, including teenagers who are 16, 17, 18, who are still in primary school. That can, of course, lead to some very serious issues. Having 16, 17-year-old boy students, for example, around 11, 12, 13-year-old girls can lead to the obvious issues of pregnancies in school, a problem which, of course, we'll talk about again later. So the school systems do have their problems and their issues and their limitations. The curriculum is quite okay. It is, I think you would say, a bit old-fashioned, but it is catching up. There is an attempt to make it relevant to Malawi. So history classes include African history. Geography includes African geography. There is agriculture as a compulsory subject, and there is Chichewa as a compulsory subject. So that's the basic structure of schooling in Malawi. Once you get to the end of secondary school, you take some final exams, which are called MSCE. If you do very well in those exams, you have a chance to apply for university, and then that, of course, is another story. So tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about some of the problems that are associated with this education system as it is now, and some of the things that I feel need to be done in order to keep things moving forward here.